How would you feel if a carefree afternoon with your children turned into a confrontation with flashing lights and suspicion simply because of the colour of your skin? On a golden Saturday afternoon, Dr. Sandra believed, just for a moment, that she had escaped the weight of her job. The park was alive with laughter, the kind that made strangers smile, and mothers' hearts ache with joy. Her sons, Brian and Edward, sprinted across the grass, their fingers still sticky with melted ice cream, their voices high with delight. Football arced through the air, giggles tumbled after it, and Sandra allowed herself the rare luxury of feeling like just a mum, not an FBI agent, not a woman trained to read danger in every shadow. "Catch, Mum," Brian called, tossing the ball with more hope than skill. Sandra leapt from the bench, stumbling in mock clumsiness that sent her boys into fits of laughter. For that fleeting moment, joy was louder than the world's judgment. But judgment has a way of finding them. 20 feet away, at a picnic table, a white couple watched. The woman's lips tightened. Her whispers, sharp as blades, carried just enough for Sandra to hear. "Suspicious woman. Those boys don't even look like hers." A phone rose like a weapon disguised as a lifeline. Brian froze mid-sketch, his pencil hovering above the page. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by the too familiar shadow of fear. He was 12, old enough to understand. Old enough to know what it meant when strangers looked at him not as a child, but as a threat. Sandra knelt beside him, her voice steady though her chest burned. "Eyes on me, baby. We're here to laugh, remember?" She wanted him to believe it. She wanted to believe it herself. Edward, still wrapped in innocence, tugged at her sleeve. "Tag, Mom? Please?" His plea pulled her back into the sunlight, back into the fragile illusion of normalcy. She smiled, brightly, defiantly. "You're on, but I hope you're ready, because I'm fast." The chase began, laughter ringing out across the park, louder than prejudice, if only for a while. Yet, Sandra's eyes never left the woman with the phone. She knew the rhythm of this cruel dance, how black families are watched, doubted, reported. She knew how quickly a perfect afternoon could collapse under the weight of someone else's fear. And soon, she would know it again. The woman's whispers sharpened like daggers. "Doesn't look right. She's watching the other kids too closely." Brian heard it. Again. The light in his eyes dimmed, his notebook pressed tight to his chest as he drifted closer to his mother's side. Sandra pulled him into her arms, whispering against his ear, "It's okay, baby. We belong here, just as much as anyone else." Then came the sound she had dreaded. Tires grinding over gravel. A patrol car rolled into the lot, white and blue flashing under the sun. Not lights, not sirens, but presence. Heavy, deliberate, suffocating. The air itself shifted, laughter on the playground thinning into silence. Sandra's instincts sharpened instantly. She read every detail. The slow crawl of the vehicle, the way two uniformed figures scanned the park with suspicion, disguised as vigilance. Their eyes found her, and lingered. She knew that stare. She had lived beneath it for years. Automatic suspicion, prejudgment. The silent verdict handed down before a single word was spoken. "Mum?" Edward's small voice broke through as he rushed back, uncertain now, sensing danger without yet understanding it. Sandra gathered both boys, their small shoulders tucked beneath her arms. They stood like an island in the middle of the sun-warmed grass, the forgotten football lying at their feet. She could already feel the storm forming. At the picnic table, the woman clutched her phone as though it were both shield and sword. Her husband's approving nod was almost smug, as if justice had arrived to defend their prejudice. Brian leaned against her side, whispering with a tremor in his voice, "Mum, are we in trouble?" Sandra bent low, her reply steady, deliberate. "No, baby, remember this. We've done nothing wrong. No matter what happens, we are not wrong." The car door slammed, echoing like a gavel. 2 officers approached, one adjusting his belt with slow, calculated authority, the other mirroring his steps in silent choreography. Every movement was a performance of control. "Afternoon, Ma'am," the first officer said, his tone clipped, official, hollow. We received a call about suspicious activity in the park. Mind if we ask you a few questions? Sandra's hand tightened protectively on her son's shoulders. Her voice was calm, but each word carried steel. There's no suspicious activity here, just a mother enjoying the park with her children. The officer's eyes narrowed. We got a report about a woman, possibly with kidnapped children. Protocol requires us to investigate. He bent toward Brian and Edward, his voice sliding into an exaggerated friendliness that only deepened Sandra's unease. Hey there, boys. Is this really your mum? Do you know her full name? The question hung in the air, toxic, designed to sow doubt. Sandra felt Brian trembling, but he lifted his chin. Of course, she's our mum. Her name is Dr. Sandra. Edward jumped in eagerly. Dr. Carter, she helps catch bad guys. The officer's expression didn't soften. Instead, he straightened and said flatly, Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification. Sandra's jaw tightened. She kept her voice steady, refusing to let it crack. Officers, these are my children. I'd like to know why we're being harassed for enjoying a peaceful afternoon. We're not harassing anyone, the second officer interjected smoothly. We're following up on a citizen's report. He gestured toward the picnic table, but the woman suddenly found something fascinating in her lap, avoiding the eyes of the crowd now gathering. Phones rose. The world was watching. Sandra had been here before. She knew how swiftly these encounters could spin out of control. Her heart beat steady, her mind racing. Every word mattered. Every breath could decide what happened next. Actually, the first officer said, shifting his gaze to the parking lot, that SUV over there matches the description of a vehicle tied to some recent thefts. I'll need to see your registration too. And with that, the net drew tighter. The accusation was so thin it barely deserved breath. Sandra read the nameplate with deliberate calm. Officer Daniel, you and I both know that isn't true. You're fishing, and you're doing it in front of my children. His jaw tightened. Ma'am, if you continue to be uncooperative... I haven't been uncooperative, she interrupted, voice steady as steel. I'm stating facts. My boys and I have done nothing wrong. You have no probable cause. The crowd pressed closer now, whispers cutting through the air like sparks. This isn't right. They're just kids playing. Daniel's partner shifted a step to the side. To the untrained eye, it was nothing. To Sandra's trained instincts, it was a tactical maneuver, a silent attempt to control the space around her. The pressure mounted. Last chance, ma'am. Produce your ID, or we'll take this downtown. Sandra's heartbeat steadied, calm before the storm. She could see her son's wide eyes watching every move, their innocence teetering on the edge of trauma. She had to finish this quickly. Fine. My ID is in my bag. I'm reaching for it now. She moved deliberately, telegraphing every inch. But before her hand touched the strap, Daniel lunged, grabbing her wrist hard enough to bruise. And the world shifted. Training took over where thought left off. In one fluid motion, Sandra twisted her arm free, pivoted, and planted her son safely behind her with her other arm. Her voice dropped into a register that made the air itself tighten. Do not put your hands on me. The crowd gasped. Phones shot higher. The energy in the park cracked like a thunderclap. The mother at the picnic table, so smug just minutes ago, rose to her feet, stunned, her phone dangling forgotten in her hand. Back away from my children, Sandra commanded, authority radiating from every syllable. She wasn't just Sandra now. She was Dr. Sandra, federal agent. Daniel's partner touched his radio. Sandra's words sliced through the rising chaos. Before you make that call, you should know exactly who you're dealing with. You've both made several serious mistakes in the last 5 minutes, and I've documented every one. Behind her, Brian and Edward stood frozen, eyes wide. They saw their mother transform, no longer the playful woman chasing them across the grass, but a warrior, unshakable, commanding. Daniel tried again. Ma'am, you need to... No, Officer Daniel, you need to think very carefully about your next move. because this is about to become much more complicated than a false report in a park. The rubber band of tension snapped. Both officers lunged at once. Training collided with anger. But anger makes men sloppy. Daniel grabbed for his taser. His partner went for a direct takedown. Time seemed to slow, every detail sharp as glass. Sandra's body responded like a reflex, every movement drilled into muscle memory. She sidestepped, redirecting Daniel's momentum. His arm twisted, his own weight carrying him off balance until the taser clattered to the grass. In one motion, she locked his wrist and drove him down. "Mom!" Brian cried, voice cracking with fear and awe. "Stay back, boys," Sandra commanded, steady as stone. "Remember what we practiced. Safe distance." The second officer charged. Sandra released Daniel with a shove, dropped low, and swept his legs from under him. He slammed into the ground, the sound echoing through the stunned silence before the crowd erupted. "Get them, sister," someone yelled. Others gasped, recording every second. Daniel scrambled up, his face flushed with rage, humiliation burning hotter than the sun above. His hand shot toward his holster, but Sandra was faster. She closed the distance before his fingers even brushed steel. Her elbow drove into Daniel's solar plexus, a precise strike that knocked the breath from his lungs. As he crumpled, Sandra seized his gun arm, pivoted with perfect control, and sent him crashing over her hip. He hit the ground hard, grass and dust exploding beneath him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Oh my God! Did you see that?" a woman cried. Phones tilted closer, capturing every second. The second officer lunged back into the fight, baton raised in a reckless swing. Sandra's body moved before thought. Block, trap, twist. The baton clattered harmlessly to the side. "Stand down!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You're only making this worse." But rage blinded them. A wild punch came flying. Sandra slipped it effortlessly, countered with a sharp jab to the throat, and swept the man's legs from under him. He collapsed, gasping in the dirt. Daniel charged again, reckless and humiliated. Sandra met him head-on. Block. Counter. 3 rapid strikes to his ribs folded him forward, and in a fluid motion, she locked his arm and slammed him face down in the grass. His partner tried to rise, but her boot pinned him flat. In seconds, both officers were immobilized. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, some in disbelief. A chorus of voices shouted over the raised phones. "Get them, sister, Stassi. She's got them." "Record everything." Sandra's voice, remarkably calm, carried above it all. "Brian, Edward, are you okay?" "Yes, Mom," they said together, fear melting into awe. Edward bounced on his toes, breathless. That was amazing. But the victory was short-lived. The sharp wail of sirens tore through the park, growing louder, closer. Tires squealed as 3 more patrol cars skidded into the lot, lights flooding the grass in harsh blue and red. Doors flew open, weapons drawn, confusion shouted from every direction. Sandra didn't flinch. She stayed perfectly still, her stance controlled, her hands visible, her voice clear and deliberate. "Everyone, stay calm. Keep recording. Document everything." The crowd obeyed, phones rising higher. "Release them immediately," barked one of the new officers, weapon pointed straight at her. Sandra's tone was measured, steady, commanding. "I'm going to reach for my credentials. My identification is in my back pocket. I will release these officers slowly, then show you who I am." Every movement was deliberate. She eased her grip, letting the 2 officers scramble to their feet, red-faced and dishevelled, their authority shattered. Then, with slow precision, she reached back. The crowd held its breath as she withdrew the leather case, flipping it open with a snap. The gold shield caught the sunlight, gleaming for every phone camera to see. "I am Special Agent Dr. Sandra, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Her voice carried across the park, silencing the shouting, silencing even the sirens. "And these officers have just committed multiple violations of federal law while assaulting a federal agent, in front of dozens of witnesses." Click, click, click. Cameras captured the badge, the agent's humiliation, and the horror, dawning on Daniel's face as the weight of his mistake sank in. Behind Sandra, her son stood tall, their fear gone, their pride unmistakable. The crowd murmured in astonishment, someone whispering, "That's why she moved like that. She's FBI." The backup officers hesitated, weapons slowly lowering. The air was charged, heavy, almost sacred. Silence stretched, broken only by the endless sound of phones documenting truth, proof against lies. And for the first time that day, the balance of power shifted. The backup officers spread into a loose circle, hands hovering near their weapons, eyes locked on Sandra. She stood tall in the center, badge raised like a shield, every movement deliberate, controlled. "Let me explain exactly what happened here," she said, her voice calm, practiced, the cadence of someone who had walked through fire before. "I was here with my sons. Your officers approached us without cause. They escalated to physical force. I defended myself as I am trained to do." A grey-templed sergeant stepped forward, voice even but cautious. "Ma'am, we'll need to verify that badge." "Of course." Sandra handed her credentials over with slow precision. "You can also call the local FBI field office. They'll confirm who I am." The sergeant studied her ID, then spoke into his radio. Around them, the crowd remained a wall of raised phones, an army of digital witnesses, recording every second. Brian leaned close, his whisper barely audible. "Mum, everyone's watching." Sandra's hand squeezed his shoulder. "Good," she said softly. "The truth needs witnesses." At the patrol car, Daniel and his partner huddled, faces twisted with humiliation and anger. They barked into their own radios, gestures sharp, desperate. When Daniel stepped forward again, his voice cracked with rage. "She attacked us! Badge or no badge, she assaulted officers." His partner piled on, words rehearsed and slick. "She was acting erratic from the start, suspicious, refusing simple instructions." "That's a lie," Edward burst out, his small voice fierce, but Sandra stilled him with a gentle hand. "Let them talk," she whispered. "Every word digs them deeper." Daniel's finger stabbed the air toward her. "How do we even know that's a real badge? FBI agents don't hang around parks tackling cops." Sandra didn't flinch. "I was here with my children. You made physical contact first. And every phone in this park shows exactly what happened." The crowd roared in agreement, dozens of screens lifted higher, proof against lies. Yet Sandra saw it, the shift. The backup officers exchanged glances, posture stiffening, loyalty hardening. Despite the evidence, despite the truth, they were choosing sides, and it wasn't hers. Then the black SUV arrived. Police markings gleamed under the afternoon sun. Captain Matthew stepped out, his presence alone tilting the atmosphere. Sandra knew the name, the reputation. A man who shielded his own no matter the cost. His eyes swept the scene, cold, calculating. He barely looked at Sandra's badge before turning to Daniel and his partner. "Officers, are you injured?" "She attacked us, Captain," Daniel blurted, seizing the lifeline. "We responded to a suspicious person call, and she turned violent." Harlan's gaze shifted to Sandra, face a mask of disdain. "Agent Carter, if that's truly who you are, you understand this will require investigation. Assaulting officers is a serious crime." Sandra held her ground. "Captain Harlan, your officers harassed me and my children without cause, escalated to violence and attempted to use weapons. Everything is on video." Harlan's lips curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Videos can be misleading. They don't show what came before. We'll need statements, and we'll verify your credentials through official channels." He moved among his men, quiet words exchanged. Their shoulders straightened, uncertainty dissolving into a unified wall of hostility. The truth was being buried in real time, rewritten before the ink of the moment was even dry. When Harlan turned back, his eyes locked on Sandra with a look she knew too well. Cold, calculating, malicious. And in that silence, with dozens of cameras still raised, the battle lines became unmistakably clear. This was no longer about a false report in the park. For Captain Harlan, Sandra realized, It had become a battle of power. His authority, his system, his control. And to him, she wasn't just a woman or even an FBI agent. She was a threat. A cold shiver ran through her spine. She had seen that look before. Men in power, desperate to protect their own corruption, willing to twist truth until it broke. Her moment of vindication was gone. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. "Mum?" Brian's voice was small, fragile. "Are we in trouble?" Sandra drew both boys closer, her arms a shield even as her eyes stayed fixed on Harlan. His back was turned, his radio call hushed, but his posture rigid with intent. "No, baby," she said evenly, steadying her voice despite the dread coiling in her chest. "But this fight might last longer than today." The drive home stretched endlessly, each turn of the suburban streets bathed in the long shadows of the setting sun. Sandra checked the rearview mirror again and again, half expecting flashing lights in pursuit. Every corner felt like a trap waiting to spring. From the back seat, Brian's question pierced the silence. "Are they going to arrest you?" Sandra's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, but her voice remained calm. "No, I didn't do anything wrong. And everything is on video, remember?" "But what if they lie?" Edward whispered, his voice trembling. "What if they make up stuff about you?" Sandra swallowed hard. "Then we'll fight with the truth. I promise. I'm an FBI agent. I know how to handle this." Brian leaned forward, awe replacing fear. "You were amazing, Mom. The way you stopped those cops. It was like a movie." Sandra exhaled, her eyes softening. "I didn't want you to see that side of me. I'm trained to protect, but fighting should always be the last resort." "Were you scared?" Edward asked. She thought before answering. "Yes, but being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. Sometimes bravery is standing up for what's right, even when you're afraid." By the time they reached home, the sky was bruised with twilight. Their house, once a sanctuary, now felt more like a fortress. Sandra scanned the street, locked every door, drew the curtains tight. Her ears caught the boys' whispers in the bathroom as they brushed their teeth. "Did you see how fast she moved?" "Yeah, but what if the mean cops come here?" "Mom won't let them. She never will." Sandra's chest ached. They should be talking about superheroes or cartoons, not whether the police might show up at their door. Later, she tucked Brian into bed. His walls were plastered with sketches, mostly caped heroes, but on his desk, fresh pencil lines already took shape. A figure that looked unmistakably like her, strong, fierce, unshakable. "Try to sleep," she said gently. "Anthony Oro will look brighter." He grabbed her hand, holding it tight. "Mum, I'm proud of you. You didn't let them push us around." Sandra kissed his forehead. "And I'm proud of you too. You were brave when it mattered." Next door, Edward was curled beneath his worn blanket, clutching the stuffed elephant that had soothed him since toddlerhood. His wide eyes shimmered in the glow of his nightlight. "Stay with me for a little while?" he asked. Sandra sat on the edge of his bed, running her fingers through his curls. "Of course, baby." "I was really scared when they grabbed you," Edward whispered. "But then, you weren't scared at all." Sandra pulled him close, her voice soft but unwavering. "I was scared. But sometimes, Edward, being brave means acting strong even when you feel afraid inside." In the quiet of that room, Sandra knew the battle wasn't finished. But for tonight, holding her sons close, she had already won something more important, teaching them that courage was possible, even in the face of fear. That's what real courage is. Edward clung to her tighter than usual when she kissed him goodnight. His small body trembled in her arms, and the ache in Sandra's chest deepened. "I love you, Mum," he whispered fiercely, as if the words themselves could protect her. "I love you too, baby, more than anything in this world." She waited until his breathing softened into sleep before slipping out of the room. Downstairs, the house pressed in on her with a silence that felt heavy, suffocating, a silence that carried threats unsaid. Her phone buzzed. Sandra, her closest ally at the bureau. "Sandra, it's late. What's wrong?" "Are you somewhere private?" The whisper on the other end made Sandra's pulse quicken. She stepped into her office, closing the door behind her. I am, now. Talk to me. I've been calling around, checking channels. Sandra, they're not just angry. They're mobilizing. They want you buried. Sandra's grip tightened until her knuckles whitened. The words hit like blows, stripping away the last illusion of safety. She had known it wouldn't end quietly, but hearing it confirmed chilled her blood. What exactly are they planning? She asked, voice even though fear surged beneath. The next morning, long before sunrise, Sandra sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee and her laptop. Sleep had abandoned her, but determination had not. Upstairs, her boys still dreamed, unaware of the battle already being waged in their mother's mind. Document everything, she muttered, her fingers flying across the keys. She wrote with the precision of years in the bureau, the officer's words, the escalation, the unnecessary force, and her measured responses. Each detail mattered, each line was armor. Her phone buzzed again. Ashley, civil rights attorney, veteran of 100 battles against injustice. Sandra, I've seen the videos, all of them, at least 6 angles. Those officers were completely out of line. When can you meet? The boys have school at 8. I can be at your office by 9. Perfect. And Sandra, bring everything. Your badge, your service record, prior complaints. We're building this case ironclad. When the call ended, Sandra opened Twitter. The videos had gone viral overnight. There she was, her body moving with trained precision, her badge gleaming in the sun, her words echoing through a park that had turned into a courtroom. Thousands of comments filled her screen. Single mom, FBI agent, queen. Those cops picked the wrong woman. This is what happens when you racially profile. Her hands trembled as she began to type. I am Dr. Sandra, the FBI agent in yesterday's viral video. I am also a single mother of 2 boys who watched their mom harassed and assaulted by police while we were simply enjoying a day at the park. She told the story plainly, no embellishments. The truth carried its own weight. She ended with a demand for accountability for reform. Then she pressed post. The response was instant. Notifications exploded. Retweets, likes, hashtags rising like wildfire. Local activists picked it up, adding their own stories. Within the hour, a phrase was everywhere. Justice for Sandra Bryan padded into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Mum, you're on TV. She turned. On the small screen, the morning news split the shot. One side showing the viral video, the other her FBI badge photo. The headline scrolled in bold letters. Hero, Mum, or Threat? FBI agents park confrontation sparks national debate. Brian's eyes shone with pride. They're calling you a hero. Sandra held his gaze, her heart torn between pride and dread. She knew the truth. In America, a black woman standing up to power was never seen the same way by everyone, and the fight had only just begun. Sandra pressed a kiss into her son's curls, holding him for an extra heartbeat. The only thing that matters, sweetheart, is that we hold on to the truth. Everything else, just noise. But the noise was swelling into a roar. By the time she left the school drop-off, after a delicate conversation with the principal about reporters possibly sniffing around, her phone was lighting up non-stop. Messages stacked on top of one another, journalists chasing quotes, organisers urging her to speak, the FBI's media team firing off stiff reminders about protocol. Later that morning, in Ashley's office, Sandra stood by the window while her attorney scrolled through a live stream on her tablet. Outside the local precinct, crowds were already forming. Hand-painted signs bobbed above a sea of faces. Protect Black mothers. Who holds police accountable? Ashley scribbled quickly into a notebook. Good. The pressure's building. Pressure makes institutions crack. Sandra's phone buzzed again. A new text from Sandra at the bureau. Press conference at noon. Chief Matthews, be ready. They flicked on the television. Matthews, face red and uniform, sharp as pressed steel, leaned into a forest of microphones. His voice oozed control. While we take complaints seriously, The public must remember our officers face dangerous, split-second choices. Ashley muttered, "Classic cover. They're circling the wagons." But Sandra wasn't listening. Her eyes were on her phone as support surged across her feed. National organisations offering help, black women in uniform sending solidarity, mothers she had never met writing messages of fierce love and recognition. A new banner pulsed across social platforms. "We stand with Sandra." She turned her screen to Ashley. "People are sending donations already. We don't even have legal bills yet." Ashley smiled thinly. "They see themselves in you. A mother shielding her children. A professional targeted for her skin. You're standing your ground, and they're standing with you." Another post slid past Sandra's eyes. A side-by-side image. Her son's terrified faces on one half, and on the other, her defiant stance against two armed men. The caption read, "This is what happens when you threaten a mama bear." Something eased in Sandra's chest. Not relief exactly, but the weight shifted, shared across thousands of shoulders. Fear was still there, but hope was beginning to shine through the cracks. "Maybe this isn't impossible," she whispered. "Maybe we really can make them answer for what they've done." Ashley's hand found her shoulder. "That's exactly what they're afraid of, which means we're already winning." For the first time since the park, Sandra felt warmth break through the storm inside her. The system was strong, yes, but so was the truth, and the world was watching. That afternoon, Sandra walked into the FBI field office, flashing her badge at security. Relief flickered when the scanner beeped green. Inside, familiar halls greeted her like stone walls against the chaos outside. Colleagues offered sympathetic nods but said nothing. She kept moving. In her office, blinds drawn tight, she opened her laptop and logged into the database. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She had clearance, but not for this. "Justice doesn't always wait for permission," she whispered and typed, "Mark Daniel." The screen filled with files. Her stomach turned. 5 excessive force complaints in just 2 years. All victims people of colour. Everyone swept away with a few lines of paperwork, resolved with no discipline. The pattern was glaring. Confront, escalate, rewrite the story. Sandra downloaded the records into a secure folder, jaw set. Her phone buzzed. A message from Brian. "When are you picking us up?" 4:30 sharp, she replied, then turned back to the screen. The deeper she went, the darker it got. Daniel's partner's record was just as tainted. Complaints, internal affairs probes, and every single one buried before daylight could reach it. Sandra leaned back in her chair, pulse steady but heavy with certainty. This wasn't about 2 bad cops. It was about a system built to erase the truth, and she had just started to uncover it. A dry knock at the office door flinched her out of the files. Sandra minimized the windows and called, "Come in." Anthony slipped inside, closing the door behind him, voice low. He didn't beat around it. "You need to see this. Came through unofficial channels." He thrust his phone across her desk. The screen showed an internal memo stamped for department eyes only. Language crafted for damage control. Phrases like potential threat to officer safety and history of aggressive behaviour. Sandra felt the air leave her. The memo read like a script being written for the cameras, a pre-made narrative to turn her into the villain. Anthony's face was tight. "They're building a story before any hearing even starts." Her jaw set. "They don't know who they picked a fight with," she thought. She turned her laptop and held it up. "Look at this," she said. Anthony whistled, half admiration, half alarm. "That's incendiary." "Careful," he warned. "When officers are cornered, they get dangerous." "So do I," Sandra replied, not looking up as her fingers moved. Methodical, efficient, pulling down documents, following metadata trails, connecting redacted dots. Every click peeled back another layer. Altered witness statements, missing footage, complaints closed with suspicious speed. The pattern hardened into proof. This was not sloppy policing. It was a practiced system. Escalate first, file the story later, bury dissent in bureaucracy. Her phone buzzed. "Ashley, Civil Rights Commission hearing tomorrow. Anything solid? Sandra let herself smile. Small. Fierce. Bring coffee, she typed. Bring everything. She glanced at the clock. Time to collect the boys. As she packed her laptop, secure backups, encrypted drives, her office line flashed. Internal affairs. She let it ring. Let them wonder. Her heels clicked through the parking garage, echoing among concrete pillars. She felt exposed, eyes on every darkened corner. The weight of her service weapon at her hip was a small, familiar comfort. At pickup, the normal bustle felt alien. Brian and Edward climbed into the car, chattering about snacks, homework, the small dramas of childhood, but their glances kept drifting to the windows as if expecting trouble. "Mum," Brian blurted, "are those men following us?" Sandra checked the rear view. 2 cars back, an unmarked dark sedan, police style, too deliberate to be coincidence. "Just people going the same way," she said smoothly, then took a circuitous route to test it. The sedan kept pace. Pulling onto their street, she found another vehicle idling across from the house. 2 plainclothesmen watched from inside, faces unreadable. A detective she recognized from Daniel's precinct sat in the passenger seat. Sandra guided her boys inside, positioning herself between them and the quiet watchers. Her hand brushed the grip of her concealed weapon, a reflex calm. Then she slid the key into the door and stepped into the safety of her house. Let them watch, she thought. Let them see. Back at the dining table, Sandra's home turned into command central. Paper and printouts spread like battle maps. Around her, the team assembled. Ashley, seasoned civil rights litigator, Stephen, organizer from the Community Justice Coalition, and Sandra Chen, the investigative reporter whose first post had made the video go viral. "These complaints go far back," Sandra told them, fingers sifting through pages. "Every escalation, every shaken-off complaint, every file that disappears, it's all here." Ashley leaned in, tracing dates with a pen. Stephen's jaw tightened as he catalogued community contacts and potential witnesses. Sandra's eyes were already calculating headlines, angles, and the phone calls she would make. Anthony sat back, the phone with the memo on his knee. "They're trying to inoculate the public narrative," he said. "If we don't move fast, they'll frame this as your aggression, not their misconduct." Sandra folded her hands over the folder she'd pulled. Photos, internal emails, complaint logs, timestamps. The evidence was ugly, but coherent. Corruption had a pattern, and patterns told stories. "Then we tell the truth louder," Stephen said. "We bring witnesses, subpoena records, flood every channel with the facts." Sandra looked at each of them, lawyer, organizer, journalist, ally, and felt something close to fierce calm. They had a plan forming. Collect the witnesses, assemble the paper trail, and make it impossible for the department to bury the truth. Outside, the surveillance car idled, a dark punctuation mark on the curb. Inside, the war room hummed with purpose. The next chapter was being written, not by the men who tried to shape the story, but by the people determined to expose it. Ashley pushed her glasses higher, scanning one of the thick files. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "The pattern is unmistakable. They zero in on people of colour, escalate routine encounters, then doctor the reports to make the victims look guilty." Stephen, his large hands clenched into fists, gave a low growl of frustration. He'd spent years fighting these battles in city halls and courtrooms, but the evidence still made his blood surge. And internal affairs? Nothing more than rubber stamps. Every complaint disappears. Across the table, Sandra lifted her phone and carefully photographed certain pages, avoiding anything that might reveal Sandra's position. "Numbers aren't enough," she said. "People need to see the human side. Families broken, lives ruined, real names, real stories." Sandra's gaze flicked toward the kitchen, where pencils scratched faintly on homework sheets. Her voice was firm but cautious. "We need to tread carefully. They're outside my house right now. Every move we make, they'll try to twist it." Ashley's reply was quick, decisive. "Then, let them. We've got sworn witnesses, documented complaints, and viral videos. And you, an FBI agent with an impeccable record. They can't reduce you to some faceless troublemaker. Stephen leaned forward, elbows digging into the table. We put this in the light. Hold a press conference. Bring in every victim willing to speak. Show the public this isn't isolated. It's systemic. Sandra's fingers raced across her keyboard. And I'll run the investigation as a series. Start with what happened in the park, then roll out the bigger story. Police harassment, the buried complaints, the machinery of corruption. Sandra nodded slowly. We can't wait. They're already rewriting the narrative. Anthony showed me that memo. They're painting me as unstable, aggressive. It's textbook gaslighting. Ashley gave a humorless laugh. They always weaponize that against women of colour. Strong becomes threatening. Calm becomes defiant. But this time, the evidence speaks louder than their spin. They drew up a plan. Ashley would file complaints at every level, local, state, and federal. Stephen would mobilise the community with peaceful rallies and town halls. Sandra would stagger her articles, building pressure step by step. Then Stephen's voice dropped. And your safety? These men have allies. They won't just fight you on paper. Sandra's hand instinctively brushed the grip of her concealed weapon. Her answer was steady. I can protect myself. What keeps me awake at night is... A sound cut her off. Small feet padding across the hallway. Brian and Edward stood in the doorway, pyjamas rumpled, tablets clutched in their arms. Their faces were pale, eyes wide. Mum, Brian said softly, we heard you talking about safety. Edward edged closer to his brother. Are the bad cops going to hurt us? Sandra's chest clenched. She rose quickly, arms open. Both boys rushed forward, pressing into her sides. The room went silent. Even Ashley's pen stopped moving. Sandra cupped their faces, forcing them to meet her eyes. Listen to me. Those men are bullies. And what do we say about bullies? Brian answered in a whisper. They're cowards. They only feel big when other people feel small. Exactly. She tightened her embrace. And are we going to be afraid of them? Edward hesitated. Maybe. A little. That's okay, Sandra said gently. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you're scared. Brian's voice cracked. But what if they come here? What if they try to hurt you? Sandra glanced at Ashley, seeing the same fire mirrored in her friend's eyes, then looked back at her son's. Her tone was fierce, unshakable. As long as I'm breathing, you are safe. Do you understand? You are safe. The room held its breath. Papers rustled quietly. Sandra's keys tapped in subdued rhythm. Everyone present understood. This wasn't only about legal strategy or political reform. It was about a mother's right to protect her children, and a community's right to live without fear. The right of every family to trust those who carry authority over them. That was what this struggle had become. Brian and Edward clung to their mother until the last possible second, then trudged upstairs, glancing back as if reluctant to leave her side. Sandra watched their retreating figures, her chest tight with both fierce love and the weight of the mission ahead. Ashley's hand brushed her sleeve. We'll win this, for them and for every child who deserves to feel safe. Sandra nodded, turning back to the dining table, still crowded with papers, affidavits, and damning reports. Truth was here in front of her, but truth alone wouldn't be enough. It had to be wielded, sharpened, spoken into the world until it could no longer be ignored. Hours later, Sandra stood before her bathroom mirror, blazer perfectly pressed, rehearsing the testimony that would soon echo through City Hall. The council had scheduled a public hearing for tomorrow morning, and the stakes could not be higher. Every network in town was already running packages about the FBI mom case. The officers initiated without cause, she practiced, her voice steady. Their escalation was deliberate. My children's safety was put at risk. Her phone vibrated. A message from Ashley. CNN wants you. Let's hold until after. Sandra exhaled, relieved. They had been careful with media, allowing the viral footage and Sandra's investigative series to build momentum organically. The stories of other victims, woven into Sandra's reporting, painted a damning picture of systemic abuse. The sound of bickering drifted up from downstairs. She checked the clock. Well, past bedtime. In the living room, Brian and Edward sprawled on the floor, coloured pencils scattered around them. Brian hunched over a sketch, muttering, "Needs more red. Heroes always wear red." "Not Mom," Edward countered. "She wears blue to work." Sandra cleared her throat. "Artists, it's lights out." "Wait!" Brian scrambled to cover his paper. "You can't see yet. It's for tomorrow." "For the hearing?" she asked, sinking into the couch, exhaustion seeping through her bones. Edward climbed into her lap, absent-mindedly fingering the badge clipped to her jacket. She had fought to keep that badge. Her superiors had no choice once public opinion turned. "Are you scared?" Edward asked softly. Sandra smoothed his curls. "A little, but being scared doesn't mean you stop. Remember your book report? You were terrified, but you did it, and it turned out great." Brian looked up, frowning. "Yeah, but you have to talk in front of way more people, and those mean officers will be there." Her jaw tightened. The union was backing the suspended officers, trying to paint her as volatile, but the evidence was undeniable. "Lies can be loud," she told them, "but truth carries farther. That's why we speak up, even when it's hard." Edward's eyes brightened, like Dr. King in my book. "Exactly." She pulled him closer. "Sometimes the bravest people are the ones who stand and say, 'This is wrong.' That's how change begins." Brian hesitated, then said quietly, "Will things really change? Officer Mike at school still stares at us funny." Her heart ached at the loss of innocence in his voice. "Change is slow," she admitted, "but it starts when people raise their voices. Remember the march last week? Hundreds stood together. That's how it begins." She ushered them through brushing teeth, pajamas, and goodnight rituals. As she tucked them in, Edward whispered, "You're braver than Superman." In Brian's room, he finally revealed the secret sketch. Sandra caught her breath. He had drawn her, standing tall in her navy jacket, transformed into a superhero. Arms stretched wide, cape-like blazer billowing, shielding two small stick figures labelled Brian and Edward. Sandra pressed the drawing to her chest. Anthony, Oro, when she faced the city, she would carry this image with her. Not a badge, not a title, but the truth of who she was. A mother defending her children, and through them, a community tired of fear. "See?" Brian's eyes sparkled as he held up his sketch. "You're our superhero, and superheroes always beat the bad guys." Sandra studied the drawing carefully. He had given her natural curls the shape of a crown, her posture both fierce and gentle at once. Her throat tightened. "This is beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." She kissed his forehead. "Will you carry it tomorrow?" he asked, voice thick with sleep. "I'll keep it right here," Sandra said, sliding the paper into her folder alongside her testimony. "Promise the truth wins tomorrow," Brian murmured. She tucked him in, brushing his hair back gently. "Anthony Oro," she whispered, "the truth wins." As she closed his door, the glow of his nightlight spilled softly into the hall. Sandra pressed the folder to her chest, drawing strength from her son's faith. Anthony Oro, she would face the council, the cameras, the hostile union. It wasn't only about her anymore. It was about her boy's future, about every family's right to trust those sworn to protect them. The truth had to win. Later, she eased her SUV out of Ashley's office parking lot. The lawyer's warning echoed in her head. Be careful. They're desperate now. Streetlights fractured the night into patches of light and shadow. 3 blocks on, she spotted it. A dark sedan, lingering 2 cars back. Her training buzzed to life. She changed lanes without reason, then took a sudden turn. The sedan mimicked every move. Sandra's pulse quickened. She hit speed dial. "Mrs. Johnson? The boys are still with you?" "Good. Keep them inside until I call." Their unmarked car crept closer. No visible plates. Her own driveway loomed ahead. Pulling in was a risk, but leaving her sons waiting was worse. She cut sharply into her driveway, engine still running. The night shattered with the slam of doors. 3 masked men surged from the dark, moving with the precision of professionals. Not random criminals. This was orchestrated. Sandra exploded from the driver's seat, slamming the door into the first man's chest. He stumbled with a grunt. Another grabbed for her throat. She dropped low, driving her elbow into his solar plexus. FBI, stand down! She barked even as she knew it was futile. The third attacker's fist cracked across her mouth, splitting her lip. Pain flared hot, coppery blood flooding her tongue. She pivoted with the strike, snapping her heel into his knee. A sickening crack. He roared, collapsing sideways. From across the street came a child's scream. "Mom!" Brian's voice cut through her like glass. She couldn't look. Not now. The first man recovered, baton raised. Sandra caught the swing with her forearm, the impact jolting down her bones. She twisted, stripping the weapon from his grip, then drove her knee into his groin and smashed her elbow down at the base of his skull. He crumpled. The second attacker locked his arms around her from behind. Sandra slammed her head backward, felt the crunch of his nose breaking. His grip held. The limping third advanced, fist cocked. Sandra launched off the ground, using the man behind her as leverage. Both boots slammed into the third attacker's chest, sending him crashing against her SUV. The grip around her ribs loosened just enough. She tore free, pivoted, and delivered 2 brutal, precise strikes. Throat, temple. He collapsed like dead weight. The street was chaos now. Neighbours spilled from their porches, phones raised. Mrs. Johnson held tight to Brian and Edward, their cries piercing the night. Sandra stood swaying, blood dripping onto her blouse, body screaming in pain but unbroken. Around her, 3 men groaned on the pavement. Then the flash of red and blue. Police cruisers screeched in, lights flooding the scene far too quickly to be coincidence. Sandra lifted her hands high, voice steady and ringing with authority. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Sandra. And for a heartbeat, the entire street fell silent. I was attacked. 3 masked men. Arrest them! Sandra's voice rang out, but the officers barely glanced at the bodies writhing on the pavement. Instead, a figure stepped forward. Captain Harlan. His smirk was sharp enough to cut. He held out a sealed envelope. Agent Carter, he said, stretching the title into mockery. Effective immediately, you are suspended from duty, pending investigation into multiple acts of excessive force. Sandra's stomach twisted as she tore it open. The Bureau's seal stamped across the top, followed by pages of cold, clinical language. Surrender badge, cases reassigned, access revoked. A career she had fought for 2 decades, reduced to bureaucratic ink on paper. The men who... she began. What men? Harlan interrupted, gesturing lazily toward the street. The groaning attackers were gone. So was the dark sedan. Nothing left but neighbours on their porches, phones raised like jury members. Looks like you slipped in your driveway, the captain sneered. Might want to get that lip checked. Her badge burned at her hip, no longer a symbol of honour, but betrayal incarnate. She felt her son's cries behind her, the whispers of neighbours, and Harlan's satisfaction pressing down like a weight. Your badge, Agent Carter. Or should I say, Miss Carter? Her hand shook, but her voice stayed even as she unclipped the emblem of everything she had sacrificed for. She placed it in his palm. He closed his fingers over it like a victory. I want to file an assault report, Sandra said. Of course, he replied smoothly. Come by tomorrow. We'll take your statement about your fool. The cruisers pulled away, leaving her bloodied in the harsh wash of streetlights. Cameras clicked. Mrs. Johnson finally released Brian and Edward, who bolted toward her. Mum! Brian collided with her legs. You're bleeding! I'm okay, she whispered, steadying them with trembling arms. They took your badge, Edward said softly, staring after the retreating squad cars. Sandra's eyes moved from her son's terrified faces to the phones capturing every second, to the empty street where her attackers had vanished. The system she had sworn to uphold had turned on her in plain sight. Dawn broke harshly. Sandra snapped awake, body a map of pain. Her ribs screamed as she pushed upright, her reflection in the mirror a battlefield of bruises. lips split, jaw purpled, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Their absence at her hip where her badge once hung felt like phantom pain. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Missed calls, messages, headlines. She scrolled with shaking hands. FBI, mom suspended after violent outburst. Federal agent or dangerous loose cannon? The doctor, Sandra's story, mother or menace? They dragged her divorce into the spotlight, quoting her ex about her intensity. They twisted her defense of her children into instability. Overnight, protector had become threat. She wrapped her arms around her ribs, steadying herself. Every ache was a reminder. This wasn't just about her reputation. It was about survival. In the kitchen, Brian and Edward sat at the counter, bowls of cereal untouched. Their eyes tracked her every step as if afraid she might vanish. "Mum." Brian's voice was small, almost fragile. "Are you going to work today?" Her throat tightened. "No, baby, not today." "Because they took your badge?" Edward asked. "Yes." She forced her tone to remain calm. "But it's only temporary. We're going to fight this." Brian shoved his cereal away, frustration flickering through his fear. "What if they come back? What if they hurt you worse next time?" Sandra crossed the kitchen, ignoring the stabbing in her ribs, and wrapped them both into her arms. She pressed their faces against her, whispering fiercely, "Listen to me. No matter what happens, no badge, no uniform, I will never stop protecting you. Not ever." "They're cowards," Sandra said aloud, her voice a low growl in the empty room. "They strike from the shadows because the truth terrifies them, but we're not letting them win." Her phone buzzed, a text from Ashley. "Turn on the news." Sandra fumbled for the remote, pain radiating through her ribs. The local station filled the screen. Captain Harlan at a podium, eyes glistening with manufactured concern, voice a rehearsed performance. "We are deeply alarmed by Agent Carter's ongoing pattern of aggressive behaviour. First, the unprovoked attack on our officers. Then, multiple witnesses reporting erratic conduct. And now, last night's incident raises serious doubts about her stability and fitness for duty." The feed cut to shaky cell footage. The grainy clip showed only her blows, edited to erase the masked men's attacks. Across the bottom, a headline crawled, "FBI agent's violent breakdown." Sandra's fists clenched until her nails bit into her palms. Every movement of her body ached, but the real pain was deeper. The betrayal, the rewriting of reality, the attempt to erase her humanity. She dialed her supervisor. Voicemail. Called colleagues. More voicemail. Doors she'd opened over 20 years were slamming shut. The bureau was closing ranks, sealing her out. Online was worse. Comment sections and hashtags dripping with venom. Trolls called her a danger to society. Racial slurs laced through every thread. Supporters were there too, but their words drowned beneath an orchestrated tide of hate. By midday, a wall of cameras had sprouted across her lawn. Reporters clustered like vultures, lenses tracking her every move through the windows. The boys couldn't even step outside. Their home had become a cage. Sandra paced the living room, tugging curtains closed, double-checking locks. Training told her to document everything, but her hands trembled too much to type. Every car creeping past felt like a threat, every shadow a weapon. When night fell, she tucked her sons into bed. They clung to her with both arms, as if holding her could keep her safe. "You're still our superhero," Brian whispered, "no matter what they say." Sandra hugged him tight, swallowing the sting behind her eyes. "Get some sleep, baby. Things will look better soon." But alone in the bathroom, she stared at the woman in the mirror and felt anything but heroic. Her bruises had darkened overnight, her lip still swollen. Without her badge on her hip, she seemed smaller, diminished. She leaned close, gripping the sink until her knuckles whitened. The physical injuries would heal. What they wanted was worse, to fracture her spirit, to destroy her identity as someone who protected others. Her breath fogged the glass. "They want me broken." She stared at her own reflection for a long, steady moment, then straightened. The pain was still there. But something else was rising, bright and unyielding. Resolve. She picked up her phone. One call, then another. Her hand steadied with each number she dialed. "Ashley," she said when the lawyer answered, "meet me at the community centre tomorrow night. Bring every shred of evidence you've got on the union's corruption." Next, Sandra Chen. "I need those files, the ones on payouts and buried complaints. We're going to connect every dot." Then, Pastor Donald. "Can your congregation help us bring people in? Victims, witnesses, anyone silenced by these officers? We're done hiding." This was her old terrain. Assembling evidence, building networks, creating cases. They'd stripped her badge, but not her training, not her instincts. She spread the papers across the kitchen table, complaint logs, affidavits, bank transfers. A map of misconduct and cover-up stretching years back. Her own attack wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom. "Mum?" Brian's voice startled her. She turned, papers fanned out before her like a battle plan. The two boys appeared in the doorway, pajamas rumpled, eyes too wide for their age. Brian spoke first, his voice hushed but steady. "We heard you talking." "I thought you were asleep," Sandra said gently. "We want to help," Edward added, stepping closer. "You always tell us. Stand up for what's right." Her chest constricted. They had already seen more than children should. Armed officers turning a park into a battlefield, masked men storming their driveway. Part of her wanted to send them far away, shield them from everything. But another part, the stronger part, knew this was their lesson too. Running would only teach fear. "Come here," she whispered, opening her arms. They rushed into her embrace, careful not to press against her bruises. "Anthony, Oro Knight, I'll tell everyone what happened," she said, her voice low but fierce. "Not just to us, but to other families too." "Will it be dangerous?" Brian's question vibrated against her shoulder. "I'll be careful, and I won't be alone. Fighting for justice always carries risk, but we'll be smart, and we'll do it together." She showed them the table littered with files and evidence, complaint forms, payroll records, sworn statements, all the puzzle pieces that revealed the truth. Edward's eyes widened. "It's like a jigsaw. Every piece shows the bad guys." "Exactly," Sandra said with a small smile. "And tomorrow we'll show the world the full picture." She worked straight through the night, sorting, highlighting, rehearsing. The forum would be televised, broadcast live. Every detail had to be airtight, impossible to dismiss. Ashley drafted legal talking points. Sandra combed through facts, cross-checking dates and testimony. Pastor Donald called volunteers, filling the seats with people who had been silenced for years. By morning, the media had camped outside her house again, shouting through the windows, headlines screaming new smears. Sandra felt steadier now. Let them lie. The truth would break them. All day, she prepared. Her ribs ached, her jaw throbbed, but adrenaline pushed her forward. This was what she had trained for, gathering intelligence, building airtight cases, exposing hidden corruption. As dusk fell, she dressed in a navy blazer, bruises covered with careful makeup. She clipped a hidden microphone to her lapel, the one Sandra had arranged, streaming to secure servers. Her words would survive, no matter what happened in that room. Her boys sat quietly, watching her. The weight of their stares pressed harder than any headline. "What if they try to stop you?" Brian asked. "That's why we have plans," Sandra said calmly. "Security will be there. Cameras will roll. And if anything happens, you call Aunt Sandra, remember." Both boys nodded solemnly. Sandra knelt in front of them, ignoring the sharp protest in her ribs. "I need you to be brave tonight. Can you do that for me?" "Yes," they said together, "and no matter what anyone says about me, what's the truth?" Edward's eyes blazed. "You protect people. You're our hero." She hugged them both, holding their warmth like armor. "That's all I need." Outside, reporters swarmed. Questions flew, flashbulbs sparked, cameras tracked her every step. She kept her head high, clutching the folder heavy with evidence. The night air hummed with possibility. They had tried to silence her, but in doing so, they had handed her the power to expose them all. The community centre pulsed with tension. Every chair filled, people pressed against the walls, spilling into hallways. At the back, news cameras glowed red like unblinking eyes. At the podium, Union President Howard Malone straightened his tie, oozing confidence. "These allegations are nothing but manufactured outrage," he declared smoothly. "Our officers acted by the book. This so-called victim has a record of instability. This is social media hysteria, not fact." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "That's a lie." The words cut through the room, clear and commanding. Sandra rose from the front row, her blazer sharp against the lights, the thick manila folder raised high. "And I can prove it." The words cracked through the hall like thunder. Malone's confident smile wavered. "Miss Carter, you're out of order. This forum follows procedures." "Procedures?" Sandra's voice cut like steel. "The same procedures you used to bury 17 misconduct complaints? The procedures that pay victims to keep quiet?" Gasps rippled through the audience. She stepped into the aisle, her voice carrying all the way to the back rows. March 15th. Officer Daniel assaulted a teenage boy. Complaint disappeared. April 3rd. 2 officers harassed an elderly black couple. That report? Gone. June 7th. A domestic violence victim asked for help. Instead of protection, she was threatened. The union paid her $10,000 to vanish. The room erupted. Whispers, shouts, phones lifting to record every word. Sandra advanced toward the stage, documents raised high. "I have bank statements. I have sworn testimonies. I have memos signed by your own people authorizing the cover-ups. Names, dates, paper trails, years of brutality hidden under your so-called procedures." "Security!" Malone snapped, sweat slick on his forehead. "Remove her now!" But Sandra was already climbing the steps, laying file after file across the podium in plain view of the cameras. Journalists surged forward, shutters clicking like gunfire. Malone lunged for the papers. Sandra sidestepped smoothly, blocking him with the controlled precision of someone who had spent her life training for combat. Then the back doors slammed open. 3 men in tactical gear stormed in, their heavy boots pounding against the floor. She knew them instantly, the masked attackers from her driveway. This time, she was ready. The first officer grabbed for her arm. Sandra pivoted, using his momentum to throw him clean over the podium. He crashed into the front row, knocking chairs aside. The crowd screamed. The second swung a baton, his strike whistling through the air. Sandra caught the weapon mid-swing, twisted it out of his grip, and swept his legs in one motion. He hit the stage floor hard. The third, bigger, heavier, snaked his arms around her from behind. Sandra dropped her weight, broke the hold, and drove her elbow into his sternum. He staggered, choking for air. "Keep filming!" someone shouted. Dozens of phones lit the room, capturing the chaos in high definition. The first officer lunged again, taser in hand. Sandra's reflexes took over. She seized his wrist, redirected the taser into his partner's chest, then slammed them both down with efficient, practiced strikes. The largest man charged one last time. Sandra sidestepped, locked his arm, and brought him crashing face first onto the stage, immobilized in a textbook armbar. The audience roared, phones raised high. "This," Sandra shouted over the noise, her voice carrying with unshakable force, "is what they do. They attack, they intimidate, they use violence to bury the truth. But not tonight." The 3 officers groaned where they lay. Malone was gone, vanished into the shadows. The podium was littered with documents, evidence scattered like broken chains across the stage. "Sandra! Sandra! Sandra!" The chant started small, then swelled into a deafening roar. Reporters pressed closer, cameras rolling live, microphones thrust toward her face. "Dr. Carter, how long have you been investigating the union? Did they target you because you had evidence? Are there more victims? More cover-ups?" Sandra turned toward the cameras, posture tall, voice firm. "Everything you need is here. The documents speak for themselves. No more silence, no more lies, no more buried truths. The crowd surged, chanting her name louder, filling the hall with thunder. Pastor Donald raised a hand in support. Ashley gathered the scattered files into evidence bags. Sandra's camera streamed it all in real time. Sandra stood in the storm of flashing lights, bruised but unbroken, stronger than she had ever been. She hadn't just fought to protect her boys. She had dragged the truth into the light for everyone. This was what she had trained for her whole life. Not just the combat, not just the badge, the courage to stand up, to fight back, to refuse to be silenced, no matter the cost. The community centre still hummed long after Sandra left it. By dawn, the nation was watching. Headlines screamed across every channel. FBI agent exposes police corruption. Union president flees scene amid scandal. Justice Department opens federal probe. At her kitchen table, Sandra sat between Brian and Edward, cereal bowls clinking as the boys stared wide-eyed at the television replay. Clip after clip showed her on stage. Documents raised, men in tactical gear collapsing at her feet, the chant of her name rising from the crowd. "Mum, look," Brian shoved his tablet toward her. Hashtags scrolled across the screen. Justice Sandra, the protector, search us justice for Sandra. Before she could reply, the doorbell rang. She stiffened, until Pastor Donald appeared, arms full of newspapers. Each front page told the same story from different angles. Sandra, standing tall amid scattered evidence and fallen officers, the symbol of a city refusing silence. "You did it, sister," Donald said with a proud smile. "They're arresting them right now." And indeed, her phone buzzed with updates. The police chief had resigned under pressure, his face pale as he dodged reporters' questions. Hours later, the mayor declared the city would accept federal oversight. "We failed our people's trust," she said into the cameras. "That ends here." By afternoon, helicopters circled downtown. Sandra recognized FBI colleagues hauling boxes from the police union headquarters. Officer Daniel and his partners were marched out in cuffs, their rage unmistakable under the flash of cameras. Her lawyer called to explain. "The files you exposed cracked open decades of rot. They're finding buried complaints as far back as the 90s. Edward tugged at her sleeve, pointing at the TV. Breaking news. Union President Malone had been caught at a private airstrip, a suitcase of cash stuffed in his trunk. The community poured out its support. Neighbours left casseroles and handmade cards on her porch. Mothers organised vigils outside her home, holding signs that read, "Protect Black Mothers." "We stand with Sandra." One woman pressed her hands into Sandra's, eyes wet. "You gave us hope. My sons see you as a hero now." That night, her phone rang again. Director Williams. Sandra stepped out onto the porch, the sunset bleeding orange across the horizon as she listened. "Agent Carter," his tone was formal, but softer than before. "The Bureau is reinstating you. Full clearance, full back pay. We'll issue a statement commending your service. We should have supported you from the start." Through the window, Sandra could see her boys, safe in their living room, laughing at a video game. She thought back to that afternoon in the park, the look of fear on Brian's face, the weight in Edward's voice. She thought of every mother who lived with the same dread. "Sir," Sandra said evenly, "I'm grateful for the offer, but this was never about a badge. It was about my sons, about families who deserve to walk outside without fear." A pause. She could almost hear him shift uncomfortably. "I don't understand," Williams admitted. Sandra's voice was steady, carrying both exhaustion and resolve. "This isn't about fixing one department or firing a handful of officers. It's about the entire system. It needs more than oversight. It needs transformation." The sky deepened to purple as she ended the call, the cicadas humming in the evening air. Inside, Brian and Edward glanced at her, smiling when she returned. For the first time in days, Sandra let herself smile back. Because this fight wasn't finished. It had only just begun. Black mothers shouldn't need FBI credentials to keep their kids safe on a playground. Through the window, Sandra caught sight of Brian waving at her. She returned it, heart swelling with fierce love and a sense of purpose sharper than ever. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. "So, what are you saying, Carter?" Director Williams had asked before the line went quiet. "I'm saying my mission just got bigger," she told him. "Those mothers outside with candles in their hands, they deserve someone fighting beside them. Every child deserves a park without fear. Every family deserves the truth." Across her lawn, neighbours gathered at the fence, their voices carrying into the night. Candles glowed against the dark, stories of injustice mixing with hope. Sandra listened, her chest tight. "The badge was never my power," she whispered to herself. "My power is knowing right from wrong. It's standing up when they try to silence you. It's teaching my boys that no one gets to decide their worth." The silence after her words felt heavy, but not hopeless. On the other end of the call, Williams had sighed. "Whatever you choose, Carter, you've already made a difference." Sandra ended the call, tilted her face toward the sky. Far off, sirens wailed, but for once she didn't flinch. Change was coming. Slow, grinding, inevitable. A week later, Sandra parked at Henderson Park. The same fountain glittered, the same trees whispered in the breeze, but the air felt transformed. "Mum, our table's free!" Brian shouted, pointing to their old picnic spot. Sandra smiled, a mix of relief and grief surging through her. This park had been their refuge, then their battleground. Today, maybe it could be a sanctuary again. They stepped from the SUV, and for the first time, eyes followed them not with suspicion, but with respect. A mother at the swings gave a quiet wave. An older man with a newspaper lifted his chin in salute. "Can we get ice cream first?" Edward asked, squeezing her hand. His gaze flicked nervously toward the space where squad cars had once rolled in. Sandra squeezed back firmly. "Of course. Rocky Road for you, mint chip for your brother, and plain vanilla for me because I'm boring." Brian burst out laughing. The teasing felt like healing. At the cart, Mr. Rodriguez greeted them with a grin. "For the Carters? No charge today." "I should pay," Sandra began, but he waved her off. "You gave my granddaughters hope," he said softly. "That's worth more than ice cream." Back at the picnic table, they ate while sunlight painted the park gold. Brian spun wild stories, Edward adding sound effects. Chocolate dripped down their chins just like it used to. A small group of kids nearby pointed and whispered. One little girl clutched a worn basketball, finally stepping forward. "Are you really the agent who fought the bad police?" she asked, eyes round with wonder. Sandra smiled, her voice gentle. "I'm just a mum who wanted her children safe." The girl nodded seriously. "My mum says you're a hero. Can your boys come play with us?" Brian and Edward looked at Sandra for permission, faces bright with anticipation. She nodded. They tore off across the grass, their laughter rising above the afternoon breeze. As the game began, several women drifted over to Sandra's table. They shared their own stories. Traffic stops that ended in humiliation, sons questioned for no reason, daughters warned never to walk home alone. "We're starting a community watch," one mother explained, "teaching our kids their rights, recording everything. Would you speak at our meetings?" Sandra looked at the circle of women, at their determined faces, at the children playing free in the park. She felt the weight of her bruises, the echo of battles fought, but also the power of something larger than herself. She nodded. "Yes, this fight isn't over. It's only just beginning." Sandra leaned against the bench, watching Brian dribble and weave while Edward cheered from the sidelines, his voice carrying across the grass. "Yes," she murmured. "We all have to protect one another." The afternoon stretched golden, peaceful, unhurried. Someone had found an old football in her car, and before long, laughter filled the air as children and parents formed teams, tossing the ball back and forth. Edward finally joined in, catching a pass with a wide grin that nearly split his face. Sandra's heart swelled. Her quiet boy was learning bravery in the best way possible, through play. Brian, with his natural spark, organised the game, shouting instructions like a captain leading his team. For once, his head stayed high. He didn't flinch at distant sirens or glance nervously at strangers. He was too busy living, too busy being a child. As the sun sank lower, families began packing up. Blankets folded, coolers snapped shut, goodbyes traded. Sandra stayed seated, eyes fixed on her boys, who now chased fireflies near the fountain. The last light of day gilded their faces, making them glow as they laughed and darted across the grass. Brian cupped a firefly, its light pulsing softly in his hands. Edward leaned close, eyes wide in wonder, before they released it together and watched it float away into the dusk. Sandra felt tears press against her eyes, not from pain this time, but from joy. Fierce, unshakable joy. Her sons weren't glancing over their shoulders anymore. They weren't shrinking from shadows or stiffening at every passing car. They were just children again, running, laughing, existing without question. A patrol car rolled by at the edge of the park. Neither boy noticed. They were too caught up in fireflies and games, their laughter rising bright into the evening air. Sandra leaned back, her body aching but her spirit soaring. The truth crystallized inside her. They hadn't just reclaimed the park. They had reclaimed their right to belong, their right to innocence, their right to joy. As the first stars appeared above, she whispered into the twilight, her gaze locked on her son's dancing silhouettes. No one will ever cage us again. Her voice held pride, defiance, and the unbreakable love of a mother who had fought for her children's freedom, and won.